Welcome to the Facts versus Feelings podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Detrick, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sonu Varghese.
Cutting through the noise in 30 minutes each week with Ryan Detrick, Chief Market Strategist, and Sonu Varghese, VP Global Macro Strategist, taking out the boring and helping investors focus on what really matters. A quick note before we start the show. Investment advisory services offered through nationwide partnership of advisors.
Well, Sonu, this podcast today was awesome. We recorded this, what was it, Sonu? 3 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago? I don't even know.
3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago in, I don't know, not sunny Orlando, but rainy, gloomy Orlando.
Yes, it was. But yeah, this is gonna be a good one. You're gonna like this one. This was episode 103 of Carson's Facts versus Feelings Megapod Part 2 from Excell. We did a Megapod last year from Excell with multiple people. Had a lot of fun. So into this one, we'll get to the guests here in a second. But we talked a lot about psychology and the money part of everything and getting your brain in a good spot. All these different things. There's such an interesting conversation. I know we were joined by Ed Clissold over at Ned Davis Research. Ned Davis, huge fans of Ed. And who else joined us?
Brian Portnoy, the founder of Shaping Wealth. He does a lot of work with behavioral finance and helping advisors and their clients figure out how to best sort of take advantage of what we know about behavioral finance, right? I think it's hopefully a good way to describe what Brian does. And then we had Adam Holt from Asset Map as well, also in that providing advice and guidance to advisors to, again, help them, pursue their practices better from a behavioral finance standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, we went, full disclosure, how the sausage is made. You and I just went on stage and we didn't really have much of a script. We didn't really know where it was going to go. We just knew we had three really, really good guests, all look at the world a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, I think you're really going to enjoy episode 103 of Carson's Facts versus Feelings. And before I go there, we mentioned Florida. Obviously, everything that's happened, to our country with the terrible hurricane that went through all the states and people impacted. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone from Carson Group, because obviously you just keep seeing the news and it keeps unfortunately getting worse. But if there's anything anyone at Carson Group can do, please do not hesitate to reach out. But without further ado, here is episode 103 of Carson's Facts versus Feelings, talking some behavioral finance, kind of hard to say. You're going to enjoy this one. Thanks, everybody. All right, everyone, welcome to Facts versus Feelings, episode 103. All
yes.
Right, Sonu, episode 103. And we're titling this one, The Megapod Part 2, Back at Excell. I think that's the title. Close.
Yeah, we
close.
had our first Megapod last year at Excell in Nashville.
And we are excited to be doing this again. And we've got some awesome guests today. I think the easiest way to do this is probably just name and title. We do like titles around here, Ed. You remember being on with us before, Ed. We like titles. A little bit about what you do and how you help advisors. We'll start with Ed from over at Ned Davis Research, then down the road.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, my name is Ed Clissold. I'm the Chief U.S. Strategist at Ned Davis Research, and we've partnered with Carson for several years, and we provide research to our clients, written research on various asset classes. We also have investment solutions where people can invest directly in funds that use our signals and research to provide the recommendations.
And Titans fan, suffering. I'm a Bengals fan, suffering. So, yeah.
We got 16 more weeks to turn it around.
Yeah, and I'm sitting next to a Steeler fan, so I'm not sure about this. But
here we go.
Yeah, here we go. I know. So Brian Portnoy, excited to be here. Congrats on your award. Tell us a little about what you won last week there.
Really? So Brian Portnoy, founder of Shaping Wealth. We are a behavioral coaching and content platform. We help advisors deepen relationships with their clients by upskilling in behavioral finance, emotional intelligence, and positive psychology. We offer a range of courses and content and other fun things to engage the global industry as advisors become more and more guides for their clients through a noisy and complicated world. And I guess last week we were named as the industry's top disruptor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations there.
Thank you.
We've got who's that guy's? Oh, that's Sonu down there.
You know my title. It's
I don't know what your title is.
technical
Sonu.
vice president and global macro strategist, but I'll pass it on.
Then Adam Holt over at Asset Map. Adam, kind of a last minute addition, but hey, more the merrier. This will be a lot of fun. So again, what Asset Map does, and again, how you help advisors.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Adam Holt, CEO and founder of Asset Map. I'm a recovering financial advisor, 26 years, CFP. So I relate to the journey we all have in front of us. Built a firm about $1.3 billion of AUM. I realized I wanted to change a life and decided to pain myself by creating a tech company that now has 50 people and thousands of advisors around the world using a visualization software that helps advisors communicate what's going on in people's lives holistically. So really excited to spend time with you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, maybe Brian, I'll start with you. I mean, since Ryan and I were talking, we talk about markets all the time. And a lot of time, because as a function of that, we talk about prices. But prices, yes, it reflects data, but it also reflects sentiment. Sentiment is a big part of, our business. And I like what you've called, I think you've termed advisors are going to be like mental health coaches in a sense, like therapists. And, that's a basis for all the behavioral work you do. Talk about that and talk about why that's important.
Sure. I was just mentioning this on a different panel a moment ago, but I think one of the more interesting findings of modern neuroscience is that human beings are not thinking creatures who feel. We are feeling creatures who think. Emotions are actually more foundational, more natural to us than our cognitive abilities. So I spent most of my 26-year career in this industry on the investment side of things. And rule one with clients was, well, let's take the emotions out of investing. I want to argue the complete opposite. Let's put emotions into investing, but the right ones expressed in the right way so that things like, you mentioned sentiment, that's not, to use an old word, epiphenomenal. That's really real, and it moves markets. How we feel about the data is basically the whole game, and that's not sort of a bad thing. It's just something that's normal to us as people that we should take great strides to understand and include in the flow of our practice.
Like I say, it's not facts versus feelings. It's facts and feelings, even though the title of a podcast.
It's feelings, then facts.
Yes, there you go.
That name might be available if you want to swipe that one.
I'm on GoDaddy right now.
There we go. So, Ed, let's talk about feelings, because Ned Davis Research, obviously Sonu and myself and our whole team, huge fans, you know that. Let's talk about the election, right? Because what we just talked about here, emotions are running high. If so-and-so wins, I'm going to do this. If so-and-so does that, I'm going to sell. My clients want to sell. Obviously, with financial advisors, they hear it all every single day. You guys have done all the data, sliced it every which way. How worried should we be if a Republican wins, if a Democrat wins, if the House, if the Senate? Take a few minutes here to walk us through how you guys see things here.
Yeah. So the first thing I tell people is don't invest with your political views. The market has gone up under Democrats, it's gone down under Democrats, it's gone up under Republicans, and gone down under Republicans. And we're blessed to be in a very dynamic economy that more often than not actually overcomes what goes on in Washington. We're not really dependent on what goes on in Washington. But if you want to slice it on an inflation-adjusted basis, the market has done slightly better under Democrats and Republicans. We're talking less than 2 percentage point difference per year. But even that is probably not representative, because if under Republicans, you can just name a few crises, not to think too hard, like 1929 and also 1973. And then you get into 2008. So you take out some of those, and it's actually much, much closer. Now, there's also another stat that I think has been passed around quite a bit, which is mostly true, but not completely true. And that is the market's like gridlock. That is, if there's a Democrat in the White House, they prefer a Republican in Congress. And that's true if there's a Democrat. The market has done better when there's been a Democrat Congress or split. If it's done Democrat, the market's done poorly. And you could, if you wanted to say, well, there's more taxing and spending going on, perhaps. But under Republicans, it's actually done better when there's been Republicans in the White House and Republicans controlling both chambers of Congress. But then you start slicing that up and you see, well, a lot of times there's like red wave, and then things start to go south. And because presidential elections are every 4 years instead of every 2, then Republicans lose Congress first, and then the market does really poorly when it's split. So the bottom line is don't get too caught up in it. Just find, whatever your strategy is, try to make it politically agnostic.
It's clear as mud.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've said the same thing. I mean, I believe it's last 13 years, probably got the data from you guys. Last 13 years had a split Congress, stock's a bit higher. This year's looking like we're there again, and we kind of think that could happen again. Adam, you're a happy sports fan being in Philadelphia, maybe not a huge sports fan, but your Eagles look pretty good, so we'll leave it there. But also, I did see there's a direct flight, finally, from Philadelphia to Omaha. There never has been. Like this week it came out. I don't know if that matters to you because Omaha is where Carson's based. You're in Philadelphia, so a little
center of the universe.
There you go. A little easier for you to get to Omaha. But what is I know you guys take a lot of data, right? There's so much data. Like the stuff Ed and we look at is so much data, information overload, if you will. And we love to get into data. We like to get into the weeds of it. It's what we do. But I know you do a lot of good work or great work for advisors and their clients. That takes a complicated, makes it simple. You want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the data. There's a couple things that's actually pointing out. Right now, we're about to cross 2 million people mapped in Asset Map. It's about, I don't know, $1.5 trillion of financial instruments. Think about it. If all the financial planners, we take all the data we collect on our clients, we add that all up, we put into a big mess of stuff. We very seldom get the ability to take that out. One of the things that we've been experimenting recently with is, despite the fact that so many of our financial advisors are best interested, fiduciaries, right? These great words. We're seeing a massive amount of underinsurance. We're seeing a lot of longevity planning not addressed. In fact, to give you an idea, we did a cross-section survey of just income relative to life insurance. And we said, how many people are underinsured? It came up something like 400,000 or 500,000 people would probably lose their house if they died yesterday. Now, their advisors are strictly investment advisors, or maybe they do some form of money management. There's a huge opportunity, I think, for financial advisors to expand the conversation and take care of opportunities that most people are, kind of ignoring for the most part.
It's funny. I just saw my advisor outside. I was with Ryan, Grant Neal, and shout out to Grant. And I was like, yeah, my wife just told me to Grant advised me to up my term life insurance. It was like, and my wife's been on my case for 3 months now. And I haven't done it. And all it takes is a Teams message to our insurance people. And yeah, related to that, right? How important is communication, right? I know, like, getting back to that whole point of data, yes, you can have all the data, you can throw all the charts and everything, right? But how important is communication and continuous communication with, advisors and clients?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, we're communicating constantly with our clients, right? Because they're thinking about this stuff episodically throughout their day. They're not reaching out on it, right? Are they hitting our website? No, they're living their life. Most of us are here, probably in this audience right now. There are people who haven't taken care of things we know we haven't done. Have we done our wills? Have we checked our guardian provisions? Right? These things that we all know. But I think the real more important part, and I think it's important about communication, is relevant communication that's consumable by our clients. And by the way, here's the problem. Most advisors are actually working with we'll call this an engaged partner, right? The CFO of the family. It's usually the person you're engaging with all the time. And if they're married or have a partner, they don't show up, or they're not really paying attention. They're not the money people. What we're seeing is a real big challenge with, especially just think about it generationally, where money will move throughout the generation. Who's going to inherit this money? Who's going to be my next client? The under-engaged spouse, and this is really, I'd love to hear Brian's perspective on this. There's a massive amount of under-engagement between the under-engaged spouse who's sitting and riding shotgun and has no concept of where their stuff even is. Mm-hmm. So the one who might be motivated to make sure you go get your life insurance, the one who really is at risk, is not getting a voice. And I think that's the opportunity we all have as advisors, to communicate with everyone in the family, not just our engaged client.
Actually, to that point, Brian, what is when you say advisors will be behavioral coaches, but to what Adam just said, you're usually dealing with multiple members of a family. How do advisors address that challenge of, one person's different from the other? And even like my wife is a therapist, and she's not a couples therapist. You don't deal with them at the same time, but you deal with them individually, right? So I'm curious how you think about that and how you've talked to advisors about that.
Well, it's such an important point, and I just think it speaks to both the difficulty and the importance of the task at hand. which is communicating with families about their overall well-being. We can't forget that financial well-being is part of a larger interest in flourishing. There's physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial well-being. And even though we are just collectively, advising on the money piece, it's connected to everything else. So, part of what's necessary if you want to level up to bring effective coaching techniques to your practice is appropriate listening skills and questioning skills. It might be the case that you lean in with one spouse or the other, and maybe stepping back and asking, well, why do I have a better conversation with him than her, as opposed to saying, well, and this is a kind of a traditional dynamic that I'm leaning on, but often the man will speak over the woman, and the advisor will follow suit. So instead of saying, well, one person isn't as informed or isn't as interested, well, what am I doing to the dynamic as an advisor or a planner where I can actually lean in differently? It might be sort of setting up separate meetings. It might be co-creation of agendas where the less the partner who's speaking less is invited to speak first. And I've heard from many of our clients that the guy wants to chime in first. Well, you have to politely be like, hey, maybe we pump the brakes for a moment. Let's let this other person speak, get views on the table, and if done in an appropriate way, it can create such an opportunity for self-discovery and an elevation of the relationship. It's really can be a hallmark moment in the client-advisor relationship.
Very interesting. Let's move back. Great stuff there. Let's go to the markets a little bit, Ed. I heard some words here, there's sentiment and feelings and things like that. I mean, what Ned Davis Research has done for a long time. When Ned founded the company, I don't know how long ago Ned founded it. I mean, what?
1980.
1980.
Been a minute.
So you guys focus a lot on sentiment, probably everybody does it now, but way before other people. What have you found when it comes to sentiment, and why is it that at extremes, as humans and creatures, we're always wrong, right? We're always bullish at the worst time, we're always bearish at the worst time. It seems like that's happened throughout history. Maybe this is some questions for everybody else in the aisle, because I think you all probably have an opinion on this, but you guys have done the work on that. Why is that? And do you see any extremes right now in any asset classes or anything going on? I personally don't, but I mean, I'd like to know if there's anything that stands out to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, even though there's a lot more electronic trading that goes on, algorithms are responsible for over half the volume on a daily basis on the NYSE. The big decisions are still made by people, and as long as that's the case, emotions are going to be involved. And by definition, a market top is a point of extreme optimism, and a market bottom is a point of extreme pessimism. And in order to get those extremes, you need to bring the people who are most skeptical over the edge. And so I think a great example was in 2000, when there were so many people who were bearish in the late 90s, and then they either got on board, or in some cases, strategists like myself were fired for being too bearish. So brings us to right now. There have been a couple of strategists on the street who have either been demoted or pushed aside for being too bearish. We've been bullish the last couple of years, so we've been on the right side of it. But that does make me feel a little nervous. And if there is an area right now where probably the optimism is probably a little bit overdone, I'd say it's in the AI stocks. Look, these are extremely profitable companies. This is not like the .com stocks. They are able to, on the one hand, invest billions into AI, and on the other hand, they're returning billions of capital to shareholders via dividends and buybacks. So it's a different situation. But if you said, listen, they got a little bit ahead of themselves, it's time for catch up from some other areas of the market, I wouldn't push back on that. So
I love the quote Churchill said, if everybody's thinking alike, somebody isn't thinking. And I think, I use that a lot. Brian and Adam, I mean, you want to chime in on just the psychology from an investment's point of view, right? Why is it investors make bad decisions time and time again? I guess the best answer is that's why advisors are so valuable, to help their clients from themselves. But at the same time, why is that? Just because we're creatures and we huddle up at the same time? I mean, you take it from there. I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, I might challenge the premise that that investors make consistently bad decisions. I mean, average is average. It's not like everyone's chasing every trend, but we could debate the fact.
It's a podcast. We exaggerate sometimes.
It's all right. I like doing that. It's been a long day, so let's go for it. I mean, if we want to introduce kind of our humanity into investment and market dynamics, I think it always has to start with that we are first and foremost tribal creatures. So we all would love to believe that we were born as sovereign individuals, that we were all in Rousseau's state of nature, and then we enter into society and form social contracts. Wrong. We are born deeply connected to each other. We have these things called mirror neurons. Our brains literally change their physical nature in relation to what's going on with other people around them. This happens in the womb forward. And so we are born as tribal creatures. And the main thing about being part of a tribe is safety. The main thing that we learn from evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology is that we need to survive before we thrive. You can't lose the game. You don't have to win the game every day, but you can only lose the game once. So rule number one is don't lose. Rule number one is stick with the pack, because that's where safety is. And so fast forward, the brains between our ears are roughly 130,000 years old. I mean, we're 5 million, but our current brains are 130,000 years old. The oldest coin ever discovered was the Lydian coin in modern-day Turkey 3,000 years ago. These are two things that don't play very well together. And so we are always naturally, it's not a bias, it's not negative. It's just part of our normal humanity that we lean into the safety that we have to find every day, which means when others are going left, we're going to go left. When others are going right, we can go right. And people love to say, I'm a contrarian and I'm going to go the opposite direction. Chances are you're going to be dead relatively quickly if you don't follow the tribe most of the time.
Real quickly, I saw your way off subject, but your Twitter handle was stolen or misplaced. What happened there?
I got phished. I thought I was clicking on something, and kaboom, 14 years of relationships gone.
That's scary. Wow. Is there any advice you could give someone on that front? Because I don't want to happen to me or
click on links. Yeah.
Was it like a DM, or how did you get the link, if we can ask?
It was a DM from a friend.
From a friend?
Former friend?
Wow, I can't get in touch with them. He doesn't follow me anymore. No, don't be an idiot like me. That would be my Twitter advice.
Well, I think that's what Sonu's wife tells him, right, all the time. No, she's not the idiot, but don't be an idiot like Sonu. She's what I'm trying to say. She's a shrink.
She just wants me to get insurance now. But
there you go.
But on the point about us being tribal creatures, and like for advisors, I mean, I was talking to somebody today, and a potential client who's never invested, they sold a business, they invested in markets before, and you want them to, not only preserve their wealth, but grow it over time. Mm-hmm. And so what's the challenge associated with that with respect to everything you do and communication and visualization? How do you, help advisors, move that conversation along?
It's a great segue. And by the way, I think Brian's Twitter has gotten really interesting since you lost the thing. So I just want to commend you on all the friends you have now. No, Adam, don't respond to that. I know
you're a wonderful man.
I have to do that to you just because I love you. The interesting segue that you mentioned is the challenge that I would have answered Ryan's question is really about education, lack of education. I mean, we think about, and it kind of touches on what I said before, which is so many of us are approaching financial planning from the success is predicated on the investment return, right? If I don't have these, if I can't grow my net worth significantly, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to be fulfilled. I'm not going to have these dreams. I'm not going to be able to compete with the rest of the tribe. And I think that plays into this massive emotional kind of construct that doesn't serve us. And so to answer your question, I think the key is to just go through a cathartic process that we can all live with. For example, if I were to come into any of your houses as a financial advisor, let's say I'm going to be actually a clothes advisor, something you can relate to. Let's go into your closet, your wardrobe. Let's dump it all out on the bed. Let's decide what actually fits, what looks good, what doesn't look good, what has holes in it from college that you've retained. You all know what I'm talking about. Your wife wants you to get rid of it, but has sentimental value, right? We hold on to these things. And the same thing is true with investments, right? Very, very seldom do we actually go through this kind of cathartic process of not only inspecting it from our own view, but allowing someone else to look at it in a very vulnerable setting, which is what financial planning is all about, isn't it? And once we open that up and we trust the person who's there inspecting, and they give us some guidance, like, okay, I see you have no galoshes here, you have no raincoats. Let's fix what's missing. Let's get rid of what the stuff you don't use. I think that's the process that people have to start with. But that is an opportunity for educating our clients to say, by the way, this is how the clothes should look. This is how the investments should look. This is why you should pay attention to the tax implication of this investment, or this is why you need that insurance and you need it in trust. We have to educate our clients, I think, more than ever before. And that will enable them to make better decisions when we're not in the room.
Great stuff there. Again, this is episode 103 of Carson's Facts versus Feelings, the Megapod Part 2, live from Excell. So, Ed, I mean, I hear these words that make a lot of sense with you. I want to bring this in from the research point of view. We're hearing a lot about how the economy is slowing. Hearing a lot about how the consumer is tapped. You've got the yield curve. You've got the LEIs. You've got, initial claims, which have come back a little bit, I guess. Where do you see the economy right now from Ned Davis research point of view? Is there a recession? Maybe here's a specific question. Is there a recession coming in the next 9 months or so, or what do you think?
That's definitely not our base case. The economy is going to be slowing, but if you look at things like non-residential investment, consumer spending, the things that really tend to drive most of the economy, pretty solid shape. Even the on the government side, again, not getting to, doesn't matter who wins really, but both Harris and Trump are promising to spend a lot of money. They're going to do it differently, but there's going to be a fiscal side to this as well. And I empathize as somebody who uses a lot of data to come up with their indicators and predictions. The yield curve has been a pretty good predictor of recessions, and it's been signaling a recession for a while. The leading economic indicators, just listen to the name, leading economic indicators, signaling for 2 years, hasn't worked. The SOM rule, for those guys who kind of follow more labor market stuff, that gave a signal recently. But you have to look at what's gone on over the last 4 years, and we're still trying to transition out of what was an extraordinary shock that happened really over just a few months. And 4 years later, the labor market is still adjusting. Certainly, the rate environment is still adjusting from that spike in inflation. So you can't look at those things in isolation. And so we think there's going to be a slowdown. The Fed's going to step in, cut rates a few times, and soft landing looks like the more likely scenario.
Want to chime in on the economy?
Actually, on that, to your point about leading economic indicators, all these different indicators, it seems like everyone's always looking for some magic bullet indicator that tells us, oh, the economy is going to a recession, or markets are going into a bear market or bull market, right? The signals can potentially work both directions, but we always come across, oh, it's worked perfectly for 50 years and now it doesn't. That one's worked perfectly for 70 years and now it doesn't. But Brian, I want to bring you in. How do you coach people, educate people to, bring in a word Adam mentioned, to not look for these magic bullet type indicators or heuristics, because that is essentially, the tribal aspect of it. You're looking for a heuristic that helps you to tell you that, like, oh, if A happens, do X, right? Or B happens, do Y. Because, that works well in most aspects of life, but in finance, investing, it's a little different. So I'm wondering how you think about that.
Yeah, I probably think about it a fair bit differently, even though really the first half of my career was in this world, not my current world. What's the line that, economists have predicted 5 of the last 1 recessions? We've got a lot of models floating around, and, we're wrong as experts a lot of the time. If you look at the work of people like Philip Tetlock on expert judgment, we're not particularly good at predicting the future on almost anything. Just tons of research, whether it be across economics or politics or other domains of life. So I think the silver bullet path is just the wrong path to go. I like to go in a completely different direction based on storytelling and narrative. So I mentioned one thing: we're born as tribal creatures. At the same time, we were born as storytellers. So we weren't born as calculators; we were born as storytellers. And so, we like to throw around this word, irrational, which is an economist's fancy word for stupid. We're actually not irrational or stupid.
My wife calls me irrational all the time.
Read the room. You are a Bengals fan. You'll do okay someday. I'm sure Joe Burrow will do great. Leaning into the stories that we tell, not as window dressing, but as actually a definition of our humanity, which sounds a long way from leading economic indicators, but it's not, because we're constructing a narrative with different pieces, and we believe stories that reinforce things that we want to believe. So you can present somebody with the exact same fact pattern, and then you can see wildly different interpretations. So to me, if we're going to the core of giving great financial planning in the context of a complex economy, it's not the silver bullet direction we should go. It's what are the things that my clients believe and want to believe in, and how can I listen and understand where they're coming from? Because, nothing is necessarily irrational if you understand where somebody is coming from. And so appreciating that, and then creating a framework for what someone is trying to accomplish, focusing on their true goals, which for the most part should not be beating the market. I mean, what the heck does that even mean? It's just a made up thing. What we should be focused on is achieving your goals, leading a meaningful life, figuring out how much is enough, answering the foundational question of, am I going to be okay? Those are actually all anchored in narrative. The economy's part of that, but let's take seriously the urgency and the complexity of the narrative.
I think, narrative and story is so underrated when, everyone's like, oh, yeah, we are evidence-based, we're data-based. But to that point about stories, how does somebody become a better storyteller then?
Well, that's a good question. There's probably an app for that.
Adam, tell us a story.
I'm a storyteller too. It's great. You know what's funny? I'll tell it by sharing this. By listening to what Ed and Brian have shared, it's interesting from both the human behavioral emotional standpoint as well as the mathematical and factual. Pretty much all financial advisors exist because we provide confidence in a world of uncertainty, right? Whether we're using mathematical expressions to substantiate our decisions or otherwise. One thing that's been very clear in my research is that when people get to a place where they have to make financial decisions that have either complexity for which they're not prepared, or there's a high cost of being wrong, I can't mess it up, they tend to want a human to help validate that, whether it's calling my uncle who's been there before, or my parents, or my buddy who's good at that stuff. What's interesting about all of us in financial advice is that we have to find ways to provide the confidence to take some form of positive action. There's no confidence that we're going to actually get it right all the time. But what we're really selling is this concept of confidence, whether you use mathematical expression to support it, or economic indicators or otherwise, or you're saying, you're going down to like the core story, I think, of telling how do you build confidence. And I think one of the things that we always have to remember is, are we actually communicating confidence, or are we delivering that confidence to our clients so that they can make positive decisions for their financial well-being?
No, it's great.
So Ed, a lot of cool stuff we just talked about there. Obviously, you've been in the industry for a while now. A couple decades, probably, give or take.
Yeah, I don't want to admit the exact number. It's been a while, though.
So I was thinking, like, when I first started, we probably started about the same time. You'd write this huge research report, and it'd go out, and maybe people would read it, maybe they wouldn't. Nowadays, you or I can
definitely
do a
not
tweet.
Reading it.
Yeah. Well, nowadays,
Nobody read that stuff.
Nowadays, you and I can do a tweet, and it can go viral. It gets quoted on CNBC. Honestly, it's to that point, which is really good, and maybe potentially sometimes really bad in some instances. But how has research changed the 2 decades or so that you've done it? How long have you been with NDR? I know you said. How long have you been with NDR again? What is it?
22 years.
Okay,
yeah.
So your whole career almost been NDR. How does NDR share research now versus what they did 22 years ago?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Even if you just look at our clients who sit down and read our full research reports, they tend to be a little bit more experienced, and our younger, newer clients tend to not get much past the first page. And so what what we've always strived ourselves on doing is we very rarely write the 30-page research report, but now shorter, a lot more bullets. We're very chart-based, and so you got to get the conclusion out front. The challenge is being taken out of context, and so I probably spend a lot more time thinking about exactly the right words to use, because I know most people aren't going to get down and read the third, fourth paragraph where they understand the context. So that's the big challenge. So it's a nice ego boost when you get all the likes and the retweets. But it does also, yeah, I've been turn on the TV and hear somebody basically, I know you got that from me. You may not even know you got that from me because you heard it fourth hand and it's completely out of context.
But the game of telephone then.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said this before, and like you share a lot of data, I share a lot of data. I've said, if you take it from one person, it's called stealing. But if you take it from everybody, it's called research. That's kind of the world that we live in. Because I get quoted. I mean, your stuff gets quoted all the time. People take it. My stuff. It's just how it goes.
I'm going to use that, but not quote you.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
It's research.
I took it from somebody else.
Seems appropriate.
So Brian, we're going to go real out of the weeds here for a second. As an Ohio State guy, Justin Fields, what do you think after 1 week? From a Steeler fan point of view, obviously.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Russ wasn't going to last long anyway. He already tweaked his calf before the season began. So, yeah, we're geared up. We're geared up. I mean, I'll always remain hopeful. It can always be another 9-8 season.
Well, exactly. So I'm looking at the clock. We have about
much time do we
for
have?
one more question each. I mean, we're going to have 40 minutes. We're at 33. Maybe we'll start in the middle. I mean, Brian, any major takeaways or any conclusions you want to have? Because, again, we've got about 6 minutes here, so we probably need to wrap this
I'll add
here.
one.
Go ahead, Sonu.
Yeah.
Question on the topic of education and helping people not think in like magic bullet, and binary terms. The world is probabilistic. It's a distribution of outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
What would be if you had the power to do this? Maybe at CPS, Chicago Public Schools, which is where
We're neighbors.
Yeah, we're neighbors, right? If you could add something to the kids' curriculum, right? Okay, elementary school,
Yep.
high school. What would you add?
So it's funny. So I sit on the board of a group called the Alliance for Decision Education that was started by Annie Duke, the poker player and cognitive scientist, Philadelphia, down the street from you. And
Got a great book, Thinking in Bets.
she's got multiple great books, Thinking in Bets, How to Decide. The third one's called Quit, which is really interesting. When do you fold? When do you walk away from a bad job, relationship, things like that. So she's amazing. And she has created a group called the Alliance for Decision Education. And they are bringing critical thinking to K through 12 education. So, I've got 3 kids, 22, 20, and 18. So, a little bit older. But, I think about their ability to create a pro-con list, their ability to do a post-mortem or a pre-mortem, to go through a decision-making routine. They're wasting time learning cursive and trigonometry. They don't know how to make a good decision, and they sure as heck don't want to hear it from me. So, there's a few things I'd like to see, our youth and basically all of us level up on. But, decision-making skills, understanding that you can make a poor decision and have a great outcome, and vice versa, that luck plays way more of a role in our lives that many of us want to admit because it's such an ego shock. Decision education, not just K through 12, but for all of us, I think would, if not solve many of our problems, it would create a much more open, level playing field for proper dialogue.
I've debated teaching my kid. I mean, one of my kids plays chess.
Yeah.
But I'm like, maybe I should teach them poker. But, to that.
We should get a game together.
Yes.
Well, speaking of which, I finally started watching The Bear, which is based
So good.
Yes, which is based in Chicago. I don't know what took me so long. We're better late than never. If you're watching The
Come
Bear,
down to
it's awesome.
Chicago and we'll hit all of those restaurants.
I would say I
together.
want to go to the restaurants. Exactly.
But same question for you, Adam. I mean, on the topic of education, you do so much for financial advisors, but just wish list, right? If you could put something into kids' curriculums right now, what would you add?
I get this question actually a good amount too, and so I have a 13-year-old, and she won't now listen to me. So I guess I got to educate her friends, so maybe she'll learn by osmosis. It's funny because I think so much about financial education, and it keeps getting brought up. Why are we not taught this, right? You think about the big things that we have to do in our lives, like relationships and finance, and nobody taught us how to do it except our parents, and they clearly didn't know what they were doing. So I think the thing I would really focus on these days is really literacy. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but I mean, you go outside your circles, there's such a lack of literacy. One of the big projects we're doing for a big community charity event, we do advicetech.live every year. And we actually decided to make our charitable beneficiary Philadelphia Financial Literacy to help underprivileged communities actually start to, like, basics, not just about always investments, right? How do you manage your money, but how do you protect your family? How do you organize your stuff? And I think that's what I would focus on right now because it's a passion.
On the topic of parents, I mean, just personal story. I mean, I grew up in a family where back in India, my parents just bought real estate and gold. Right, never invested in stocks in their entire life, and I was like one of the best performing assets since 1980. I'm sure Ned Davis has some numbers for this. The Indian stock market, right? You just look at that thing, and it's like, but my parents invested. To your point about even our parents being educated or lack thereof. I mean, real estate and gold, which is both of them. Like, what were they thinking? But yeah, how much time do we have? Are we close to wrapping up, Brian?
Yeah, I think we're pretty. I'm looking at that timer over there. We're pretty close. Ed. Obviously, Ned Davis Research, Ned's name is in it. You've worked with Ned for 22 years. He's an icon, a titan in our industry. I've looked up to him for decades. What are some things you've learned from him over the years that maybe, we've read his books, maybe you wouldn't even know by reading his books, or just some major takeaways you've learned from him over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can get the research from reading his work, and he's written a few iterations of Being Right or Making Money. But the biggest one is just how to manage people and create a business. We have in our office, we have a saying on the top of the door. It says, "Through these doors walk the best employees in the world," and how dedicated we are, which I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. But he wanted to emphasize that and empower people to make decisions, and it gives people ownership, and it worked. The company grew to be one back when independent research wasn't a thing. It was a big thing because he basically had that entrepreneurial spirit that permeated throughout. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily think a data-driven research guy would think that way and manage that way, but absolutely, that was how we were successful.
Well, Sonu, any final comments from you here? Let you talk a little bit.
No, I think I think we haven't done something like this in a long time, and I think this episode, more than a lot of things, gets to that the title, right? Like facts versus feelings. I mean, why we named the podcast Facts versus Feelings. And it really comes back to, as I said at the top, facts and feelings. It's about both. And sometimes maybe more feelings, to your point, Brian.
I'm biased.
Right, yeah. But it's good to be biased from your own, research, right? Bias that's not irrational. Being biased is rational.
It's normal.
Yeah. There you go. It's normal. But yeah, no, it's fantastic to have you all, Ned, Brian, Adam. Thank you for this. Complete pleasure.
Yes, I would like to thank everyone at Excell. Just so people listening to this podcast, we recorded this a little bit before you're listening to it, in all likelihood. Excell is our large conference. We invite all of our partners. I think approximately 1,000 people are here. We're in this big auditorium right now with a lot of people listening, so thanks to everyone out here listening. Again, this was episode 103 of Carson's Facts versus Feelings. Thank you again to Ed, to Brian, to Adam, to Sonu, and obviously there's in the show notes we'll have some links for all three of you, more information on all three of them. You can learn a little bit more about them and their companies and the way they're helping our industry, helping our Carson partners, and just helping investors in general. So with all that, everyone, I guess next week will be episode 104, Sonu, if my math is right. We'll be back with episode 104 then. So thank you. Take care, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Information provided on Facts versus Feelings with Sonu Varghese and Ryan Detrick are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The statements and opinions of show guests may not be reflective of CWM LLC or its affiliates. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Facts versus Feelings are not affiliated with CWM LLC.